$1.46 million. That number jumped $200,000 in 12 months. But here's the part that didn't make the headlines. If you run the actual math on what 1.46 million generates in annual income today, using the current safe withdrawal rate published by Morningstar in late 2025, you get $56,900 a year. The survey said the number was supposed to deliver $4,800 a month. The math says $4,745. You're already $55 short before you even start. The goalpost moved. Again, Northwestern Mutual's 2026 Planning and Progress Study puts the magic number at $1.46 million, a $200,000 increase from 2025, according to data released in April 2026. The survey covered 4,375 Americans. The headline is real, but the headline is only the beginning. By the time this video is over, you're going to understand exactly why that number is already obsolete, exactly why the median American is so far behind it that the gap is not a savings problem, it's a structural crisis, and exactly what 3 specific moves actually change the math in a material way. Not motivational, mathematical. Persistent inflation, longer life expectancies, and uncertainty about Social Security all contributed to the rise in the target figure. But those are the official explanations. The real story is more specific, more mechanical, and considerably more uncomfortable. Let me introduce you to a metaphor I'm going to keep returning to throughout this video. Think of retirement planning like chasing a city bus. You know the route, you know the schedule, you start running, but every single year, the bus stop moves 2 blocks further down the street. Not because the bus is going faster. Because fuel costs went up, the route got extended, and 3 new stops were added without anyone sending you a revised map. And the people who already caught the bus, they're sitting comfortably watching you run. That is the American retirement system in 2026. The bus keeps moving. Now, in a few minutes, I'm going to show you what happens to the retirement math for the statistically average 50-something American when the bus stop moves at the exact moment they're supposed to catch it. The data on that is genuinely disorienting. But first, you need to understand why the $1.46 million number itself is more complicated than a survey result. Morningstar's base case safe withdrawal rate for a 30-year retirement in 2026 is 3.9%. That means if you have a $1 million portfolio, you can safely withdraw about $39,000 per year. And that still carries a 10% chance of failure. So apply that rate to 1.46 million and you get $56,940 per year. That is $4,745 a month gross before taxes. In most states, a portion of retirement account withdrawals is taxed as ordinary income. You're realistically looking at somewhere between $4,000 and $4,300 a month in actual take home. The survey says 1.46 million would provide approximately $4,800 in retirement income per month. Morningstar says it's actually $40 to $50 less than that per month forever. And if your retirement lasts 35 years instead of 30 because you started at 62 and lived to 97, the math gets tighter still. This is not a minor discrepancy. This is what happens when a survey measures sentiment and the market runs a different calculation. The bus keeps moving. Now let me give you the 4 specific forces moving the goalpost, because this is the part that actually matters. And it's where most retirement content stops being useful and starts being vague. Force 1. The gap between what Americans have and what the number demands is not a gap. It is a canyon. Federal Reserve data shows that the median retirement savings for Americans aged 55 to 64 is just $185,000. Not 1.46 million, not halfway there. That's only about 13% of what Americans think they need to retire comfortably, according to Northwestern Mutual data. 13%. You have 13 cents on the dollar. Only 5% of Americans with retirement accounts have at least $1 million saved for retirement, while just over 9% have $500,000. The average retirement savings for families is actually $333,940, and the median is $87,000. $87,000 against a target of 1.46 million. The bus is not just further down the block. The bus has left the county. And before you say, well, Social Security fills the gap, as of April 2026, the average Social Security monthly check for retired workers is about $2,081. Combined with your $4,700 from the portfolio, you're at roughly $6,700 a month, again, before taxes and before healthcare, which we're going to get to in a moment. That's a gross income of about $80,000 per year in retirement. Not extravagant, not poolside in Florida. Comfortable, maybe, in a mid-cost of living state if nothing goes wrong. And things go wrong. Nearly half of Americans, 48%, say it is somewhat or very likely they will outlive their savings. They're right to be worried. More than a quarter of Americans, 27%, believe they may live to 100. At a 3% annual inflation rate, the cost of living doubles approximately every 24 years. So whatever 1.46 million buys you at 62, it buys you half that at 86. The bus keeps moving, even after you thought you caught it. Now here's the reversal I promised you. You think the savings gap is the problem. It's not. Or rather, it's not the most important problem. The real problem is that the savings gap is assumed to be closable by working longer. And the data says most people don't get that option. By the way, subscribe if you're finding this useful. Otherwise, the algorithm buries it and you'll never see the next video. Almost half, 46% of people who retired in 2025 did so earlier than anticipated, according to the Employee Benefit Research Institute. Factors beyond an individual's control were responsible for 76% of those early retirements. They included health problems and disabilities, and company changes such as downsizing, closure, or reorganization. More than half, 56% of full-time workers in their early 50s get pushed out of their jobs due to circumstances like a layoff before they're ready to retire. According to a study published by the Urban Institute, workers plan to retire at 65. Retirees report a median actual departure age of 62. That 3-year gap has held steady across more than 2 decades of surveys. It's not a fluke, it's a structural feature. I want you to meet someone. His name is Dave. He's 52 years old, regional manager at a mid-sized distribution company, earns about $90,000 a year, has been contributing to his 401k for 15 years, and has $240,000 saved. He plans to retire at 65. He'll max out contributions, get the company match, and he figures everything will work out. Dave is not an outlier. Dave is statistically the median. What Dave doesn't know is that 56% of people in his exact position, full-time worker, early 50s, stable job, get pushed out of the workforce before they're ready. And 3 fewer years of contributions, 3 more years of drawing down the portfolio, combined with 3 years of unplanned healthcare costs before Medicare eligibility, can be the difference between a functional retirement and a financially precarious one. We'll come back to Dave. Here's what I want to do right now before we get into Force 3 and Force 4. I want to make sure you have an actual tool to translate this information into a specific exit date for yourself, because that's the gap that kills people. Knowing the numbers doesn't change anything by itself. Here's the part that never quite makes it into a retirement calculator. The sequence of returns risk we discussed, the healthcare bridge cost before Medicare, the Social Security timing strategy, these don't exist as separate modules you can plug into a spreadsheet independently. They interact with each other. A bad year in the market at the exact moment you retire can force you into Social Security early, which permanently reduces your benefit, which makes you more dependent on your portfolio, which gets drawn down faster. One bad timing event cascades. I built a digital book called The Exit Code to address exactly this problem. 8 chapters of pure research, no filler, built on 50 years of actual retirement data. 2 elements are directly relevant to what we've been discussing today. First, the dynamic withdrawal method that replaces the 4% trap, specifically designed to protect against the sequence of returns risk that Morningstar identified as the cause of nearly 70% of retirement plan failures. Second, the Social Security Bridge strategy, which is a specific framework for waiting until age 70 without going broke during the gap years, because the math on waiting is compelling and most people never execute it correctly. You can get it through the link in the description for less than a dinner out, less than 1 hour, with the kind of financial advisor who charges you 1% of your assets every year to hand you brochures. Force 3, healthcare. This is the ambush. According to Fidelity Investments' 2025 retiree healthcare cost estimate, the average 65-year-old who retired in 2025 will spend an average of $172,500 on healthcare and medical expenses throughout retirement, not including long-term care costs. That $172,500 is sitting inside your $1.46 million before you've taken a single trip or paid a single utility bill. And that's if you retire at 65. If you retire before 65, before Medicare kicks in, you enter what I call the ambush zone. Average monthly benchmark premiums for health insurance escalate to $1,072 at age 62, $1,101 by age 63, and top out at $1,120 for those aged 64 to 65. Per person. A 63-year-old might see a full price benchmark, silver premium of about $1,444 per month before tax credits. The enhanced premium tax credits that had lowered ACA premiums since 2021 expired at the end of 2025 and were not renewed for 2026. For early retirees, this means the subsidy cliff at 400% of the federal poverty level is back. So anyone earning above roughly $62,600 as a single person pays full price for marketplace coverage, which can exceed $1,500 a month at age 62 in some rating areas. That is the ambush. The enhanced subsidies that made early retirement healthcare more manageable for the last 4 years, gone as of January 1st, 2026. And that happened the same year the magic number jumped $200,000. The bus keeps moving. Long-term care costs range from roughly $50,000 per year for home care to more than $110,000 per year for nursing home care, with an average need of about 33 months. Medicare doesn't cover most of it. Long-term care costs aren't typically covered by Medicare, and very few retirees have insurance for it. Long-term care insurance premiums for a healthy 60-year-old average about $2,610 annually for males and $4,550 for females in 2025. But with the median annual cost of a private room in a nursing home at $127,750 in 2024, it may be more expensive not to have it. Here's a quick one from the real world to give you a taste of how this actually plays out. A friend of a colleague, let's call her Maria, retired at 63 after 26 years as a graphic designer. She had $800,000 saved, solid by most measures. She's in California. Her benchmark silver plan premium in 2026, without the enhanced subsidies, is $1,400 a month. Her husband is 61 and has slightly different coverage needs. Together, they're spending about $2,700 a month on health insurance premiums alone. That's $32,400 a year before a single copay or prescription. Their original retirement budget had $300 per person per month for healthcare. The bus moved. Force 4, the Social Security time bomb. And I'm going to keep this precise because the numbers are specific and they matter. The Social Security Administration projects that the trust fund it relies on to pay retirement benefits may run out in 2032. Barring action from Congress, that may trigger an across-the-board benefit cut for all beneficiaries. Projected reductions generally range from about 23 to 28%. According to the Congressional Budget Office, the cut could begin at about 7% in 2032 and deepen to an average of roughly 28% annually from 2033 through 2036. Using current 2026 benefit levels, a 28% cut would reduce the average retired worker's monthly benefit from about $2,071 to $1,491, a loss of roughly $6,960 per year, roughly $7,000 per year. Less money every year for the rest of your life. Starting in 6 years, unless Congress acts, the depletion date moved up a year sooner than previously projected, due to the Social Security Fairness Act eliminating the windfall elimination provision, a new $6,000 senior deduction, and higher than expected inflation driving larger cost of living adjustments. The things that were supposed to help retirees today are mathematically accelerating the problem for retirees tomorrow. Only 30% of Gen X and 21% of boomers plan to delay Social Security benefits as long as possible. More than a quarter of Gen X and 39% of boomers intend to claim as soon as they're eligible. This is the part that frustrates me most, because the math is so clearly in favor of waiting. For each year they delay past retirement age, up to age 70, retirees get an 8% increase to their benefits. By waiting until 70, beneficiaries would see 132% of their monthly benefit, 8% per year, guaranteed, on a government-backed instrument. You cannot buy that return anywhere in the fixed income market. And most people are forfeiting it because they're scared of the depletion date, which, as I mentioned, is exactly the wrong reason to claim early. If the fund does deplete and cuts happen, a 28% cut on a larger benefit still leaves you with more money than a full benefit on an early reduced check. But here's where the Dave subplot becomes the math problem. Dave retires or gets pushed out at 62 instead of 65. He's panicked. He needs income. He claims Social Security at 62. If you turn 62 in 2026, your benefit would be about 30% lower than if you waited until you turned 67. That's not a temporary reduction. That's a permanent 30% haircut on every check for the rest of Dave's life. If Dave lives to 85, that's 23 years of reduced benefits. Now let's run the full Dave scenario as a mini case study with specific numbers, because this is where the abstract becomes personal. Dave is 52. He has $240,000 saved. He earns $90,000 a year. He currently contributes enough to get his company match about 5% of his salary, so $4,500 a year from him, plus roughly the same in matching. Call it $9,000 a year going into the account. At that rate, with a 7% average annual return over 13 years, Dave adds roughly $177,000 in contributions and roughly $220,000 in growth. By 65, he could realistically have around $637,000, a solid number by median standards, still less than half of 1.46 million. At the 3.9% withdrawal rate, $637,000 generates $24,843 per year. Add Social Security at full retirement age. Dave's estimate, based on his earnings history, is about $2,200 a month, and you're at about $51,200 per year before taxes, before healthcare. That's tight. Not a disaster, but tight. One bad sequence of returns early in retirement, one large healthcare bill before Medicare, 1 year claiming Social Security early at 62 instead of 67, and tight becomes genuinely hard. Now, if Dave gets pushed out at 62 statistically, a better than 50% chance, 3 fewer years of contributions, 3 more years of early drawdown, and a claim at 62 instead of 67, we're looking at a retirement income around $38,000 to $42,000 per year. In 2026 dollars, by the time he's 80, that buys him meaningfully less. Dave's bus moved. This is not a scenario designed to scare you. It's a scenario designed to show you exactly where the leverage points are, because that's what changes the outcome. 3 practical takeaways, calibrated specifically to everything we just covered. 1, build your plan around 62, not 65. The Allianz Center's 2026 annual retirement study found that 42% of retirees stopped working sooner than planned, while just 5% retired later. EBRI's 2026 survey found similar results. 46% exited the workforce ahead of schedule. If your entire financial plan depends on working until the date you chose in your head, you are building on an assumption that the data says fails between 40 and 59% of the time. Model the early exit scenario explicitly. Plan for 62. If you make it to 65 with full savings intact, you're ahead. If you get pushed out at 62, you're not devastated. 2, create a dedicated healthcare bridge fund before you retire, completely separate from your investment portfolio. If you're planning to retire before 65, you need liquid, accessible money, not invested money, specifically earmarked for health insurance premiums during the pre-Medicare gap years. At current benchmark rates, for a couple, you need somewhere between $36,000 and $72,000 in accessible assets for a 3-year bridge. This is not optional. Medicare Part B costs rose more than 9% in 2026, and the trend is not going the other direction. The Affordable Care Act enhanced subsidies are gone. This is the new reality of pre-Medicare coverage. 3. Stop targeting 1.46 million as if it were a fixed number, and start targeting a specific monthly withdrawal amount. Then reverse engineer the portfolio you need. If you want $4,500 per month from your portfolio, not from Social Security, just from investments at a 3.9% withdrawal rate, you need $1,384,600. At 4%, you need $1,350,000. At 3.5%, you need $1,542,800. The same target income requires dramatically different portfolio sizes, depending on your withdrawal rate, and your withdrawal rate is determined by your age at retirement and your expected longevity. This is the math the survey doesn't do for you. There's a parable I keep thinking about. There was a man who spent 30 years filling a bucket with water, pouring in a careful amount every day. He had a target line drawn near the top of the bucket. What he didn't know was that the bucket had a slow leak at the bottom inflation. And every few years, someone quietly raised the target line: longevity, healthcare, Social Security, uncertainty. On the day he finally reached the original target line, he looked up and saw the line was now 3 inches higher than where he'd aimed. The bucket was closer to empty than it appeared from the top. He'd been measuring the wrong thing. Most people measure their retirement readiness by savings balance. The correct metric is inflation-adjusted monthly income, net of taxes, net of healthcare, divided by years remaining in retirement. That number is what tells you whether you've actually caught the bus. One final thing. About 3 in 5 American workers, 58%, say their retirement savings are behind where they should be. They're not wrong, but behind is too gentle a word for what the data shows. 62% of those surveyed had less than $150,000 saved for retirement. Only about 7% of what they think they need. The magic number jumped. The median savings didn't. The gap between those two lines is where the retirement crisis actually lives. Experts have said America's broader retirement system earns just a C+ grade, with persistent gaps in coverage, savings adequacy, and longevity protection. C+. For the system the majority of Americans are counting on to fund their entire second half of life. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. The bus doesn't stop running just because you stop believing in the schedule. Roughly 1 in 3 retirees in 2025 was cutting back on essentials like groceries and medical care to make ends meet. That's not a statistic. That's a